power cracked. The most powerful bookmaker in North Jersey was halfway out of his car when the past stepped into the rain and said his name without raising her voice. Sal. Not loud. Not angry. Certain. Salvatore Rizzo froze with one polished shoe still on the pavement and the other planted inside the back seat of the black Mercedes. The rain slid down the car's bulletproof glass in thin, crooked lines, warping the streetlights into something that looked like a memory instead of a place. He didn't turn right away. Men like Salvatore learned early that instinct could get you killed. You confirmed first. You assessed. You counted exits. Across the street, under a flickering amber lamppost, stood a woman he hadn't seen in almost a decade, Lucia Moretti. She was thinner than he remembered. Her dark hair was pulled back too tight, like she didn't trust it to stay put on its own. She wore a long coat that wasn't meant for weather like this. Something cheap, practical, bought because it fit the budget and nothing else. On either side of her were two children. A boy, maybe 8 or 9, standing too straight for his age. Protective. Alert. His hand was clenched around Lucia's sleeve like he was afraid she might drift away. And a little girl, younger. 6 maybe. Her hair fell into her eyes as she stared openly at Salvatore. Unblinking, curious in a way that made his stomach tighten. Salvatore finally turned fully toward them. The world narrowed. The rain. The hum of the engine behind him. The distant sound of traffic bleeding out of the tunnel. Everything else receded. He didn't need to do the math. His body did it for him. The timing. The years. The distance. The boy's jaw. The way it set when Lucia shifted her weight. Salvatore's hand slid off the car door, fingers numb, as if the ground had tilted a fraction to the left and his balance hadn't caught up yet. Behind him, Isabella DeLuca leaned forward from the back seat. "Sal?" she said, light, confused. "What's going on?" Lucia crossed the street slowly, shoes splashing through shallow puddles. The children stayed glued to her sides, moving when she moved, stopping when she stopped, like they'd learned not to wander too far from the only safe thing they knew. She stopped a few feet from Salvatore. Up close, the years showed more clearly. Fine lines at the corners of her eyes. A tightness in her mouth that spoke of swallowed words and practiced restraint. But her eyes were the same dark, unflinching brown. "You look expensive," she said. It wasn't an insult, just an observation. Salvatore's jaw tightened. He glanced briefly at the boy again, then at the girl. His throat worked once. "Lucia," he said. Her name felt heavier than it should have. "You shouldn't be here." She gave a short, humorless smile. "You don't get to decide that anymore." Isabella stepped out of the car, heels clicking softly on the pavement. She was immaculate, tailored coat, perfect posture, the kind of composure that came from growing up around men who controlled rooms with silence. She looked from Lucia to the children, then back to Salvatore. "Who is this?" she asked. Lucia answered before he could. "I'm the woman he disappeared from," she said. "And these are his children." The words didn't echo. They landed. Hard. Isabella's breath caught, just for a second. Enough that Salvatore noticed. Enough that it registered as damage. "That's not funny," Isabella said. But there was no heat in it. Lucia didn't look at her. She looked at Salvatore. "They're yours," she said again. The boy's fingers tightened on her sleeve. The girl tilted her head, studying Salvatore like he was a strange object left out in the rain. Salvatore's driver shifted a step closer, instinctively scanning the street. No sudden movements, no hands raised, but the tension bled into the space between them like oil. Salvatore lifted one hand slightly. "Give us a minute," he said to Isabella, his voice controlled, low. Isabella stared at him, really looked this time, at the way his shoulders had gone rigid, at the absence of denial. "A minute," she repeated softly. She stepped back toward the car, the door closing with a muted thud that sounded final in a way Salvatore didn't like. Lucia exhaled, slow and measured. "Still giving orders," she said. "Some things don't change. Some things shouldn't be said on the street," Salvatore replied. "Then you should have answered my calls," she said. "Years ago." The boy shifted his feet, glancing up at Lucia. Mom! Lucia rested a hand on his shoulder, grounding him. It's okay, Marco. The name hit Salvatore like a punch to the ribs. Marco, his father's name. He swallowed. And her? Salvatore asked quietly, nodding toward the girl. Lucia's fingers brushed the child's hair back from her eyes. The girl didn't pull away. Elena, his mother's name. Salvatore looked away, just for a second. Down at the wet pavement, at his reflection broken in the puddles. When he looked back up, Lucia was watching him closely. You don't get to do that, she said. You don't get to look surprised like this is something that happened to you. His mouth opened, closed. Words rose and died in his throat. How long? He asked finally. Lucia didn't answer right away. She glanced toward the brownstone behind him. 3 stories, fresh stone, security cameras tucked discreetly into the eaves. Money, safety, distance from the life she knew. 9 years, she said. And before you ask, no. I didn't know where you were half that time. And when I did, I stayed away. Why? He asked. Her eyes hardened. Because I was told if I didn't, you'd make us disappear. The accusation wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Salvatore flinched despite himself. That's not what you meant, she finished. That's what I was told. By someone who said they were protecting you. Protecting us. Funny how protection always seems to hurt the people who don't have power. A car passed at the end of the block, headlights briefly illuminating the scene in stark white before vanishing again. Salvatore rubbed a hand over his face. You can't stand here, he said. Not with them. Not tonight. Lucia hesitated, just long enough to show she didn't trust him. Then where? She asked. Salvatore looked at the children again, at the way the boy's shoulders squared, how the girl leaned subtly toward Lucia. He turned and nodded toward the brownstone. Inside, he said. We'll talk inside. Lucia studied his face, searching for something, truth maybe, or danger. Finally, she nodded once. Fine, she said. But understand this. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. I didn't come here to ask for help, she said. I came because someone else found us first. And you were the last door I had left to knock on. The rain intensified, drumming harder against the stone and glass, as if urging them to move. Salvatore held the door open. The children passed him first. Marco looked up as he walked by, eyes sharp, assessing. Salvatore felt the weight of that look settle somewhere deep in his chest. Elena paused briefly in front of him. She reached out, small fingers brushing the expensive fabric of his coat. Then she followed her mother inside. Salvatore stood there a moment longer, rain soaking into his shoulders, watching the door close behind them. For the first time in years, the power he carried didn't feel like armor. Felt like something brittle, something that could crack. And as he finally stepped inside, Salvatore Rizzo understood one undeniable truth. Whatever he'd built his life around, it was no longer the most dangerous thing standing in front of him. Salvatore Rizzo had survived 3 indictments, 2 internal wars, and 1 federal task force that never officially existed. None of that prepared him for the sound of children walking through his house. Their footsteps were wrong. Too light, too honest. The brownstone had been designed for silence. Thick walls, private stairwells, rooms that swallowed conversations whole. It was a place where men lowered their voices without realizing why. Where secrets aged well. Marco and Elena didn't belong to any of that. They stood in the foyer, dripping rain onto imported marble, staring at the crystal chandelier like it might fall and crush them for looking too long. Lucia closed the door behind them, slow and deliberate, as if sealing herself inside a vault she didn't trust. Isabella was already gone. Not upstairs. Not waiting. Gone. Salvatore clocked it instantly. The absence. The space she left behind. Good. Bad. He hadn't decided yet. Shoes, Lucia muttered to the kids. Wipe them. Marco obeyed immediately. Elena didn't. She wandered forward, fingertips trailing along the wall, brushing past framed photos Salvatore had chosen carefully. Business dinners, charity galas, Men who mattered but never mattered enough to name. "Don't touch," Marco whispered. She ignored him. Salvatore watched it all without speaking. The way Marco tracked exits. The way Elena moved without fear. The way Lucia stayed between them and him without making it obvious. Instincts. All three of them. "You hungry?" Salvatore asked finally. Lucia turned. "Is that a real question or a test?" "Both," he said. She studied him for a beat, then nodded. "They are." Salvatore gestured toward the kitchen. "Come on." The kitchen was all sharp lines and stainless steel, unused mostly. He ate out, or someone cooked for him. The fridge was stocked because it was supposed to be. Lucia noticed everything. She always had. Marco perched on a stool, feet dangling. Elena climbed onto the counter like she'd done it 100 times before. "Hey!" Lucia said softly. "Sit." Elena slid down, pouting. Salvatore pulled out bread, cheese, fruit. Simple, neutral, safe. "You live alone?" Marco asked. Lucia shot him a look. "Marco." "It's okay," Salvatore said. "Yes, mostly." "Why mostly?" Elena asked. Lucia stiffened. Salvatore didn't look at her. "Because sometimes people think they belong somewhere they don't." Lucia let out a breath through her nose. That's one way to put it. They ate in near silence. The kind that wasn't awkward, just heavy. Finally, Lucia spoke. "Someone's skimming," she said. Salvatore looked up. "From one of your sports books," she continued. "Online. Layered through shell accounts in Colorado and Washington. I didn't come here blind." He didn't ask how she knew. He already knew. "How long?" he asked. "Months," she said. "They flagged me first. Old contact. Said my name still came up in conversations I wasn't part of anymore." "Who?" Salvatore asked. Lucia shook her head. "Not yet." Marco watched them closely. "Is this about money?" Salvatore met his eyes. "It's always about money." "Then why are people scared?" Marco asked. Lucia froze. Salvatore felt something cold slide down his spine. "Who's scared?" he asked. Lucia answered this time. "The man who found us. He didn't want money. He wanted leverage." Salvatore set his fork down carefully. "Did he touch them?" Lucia's jaw tightened. "No." But the hesitation told him everything else. "Where is he now?" Salvatore asked. Lucia finally looked him dead in the eye. "Waiting to see what you do." The house felt smaller. Salvatore stood. "You're staying." "That wasn't." "Not a discussion," he finished. "Nobody leaves tonight." Lucia hesitated, then nodded. "One night." Salvatore turned to Marco. "You like cards?" Marco's eyes lit up despite himself. "Yeah." "Good," Salvatore said. "Because you're gonna learn which ones lie." The meeting happened without invitations. That was how Salvatore knew it was bad. Vince Calderone showed up first, old-school Connecticut money, thinning hair, eyes that missed nothing. Then Eddie Klein from Jersey, whose suits got cheaper every year but whose smile never did. A California intermediary dialed in, face half-lit, name deliberately forgotten. They sat around Salvatore's dining table like men attending a funeral they hadn't planned for. "No violence," Vince said immediately. "Not over this." Salvatore leaned back. "Nobody said anything about violence." "That's what worries me," Eddie replied. They talked numbers, routes, digital books that weren't supposed to exist. A quiet bleed siphoning millions through accounts that didn't belong to anyone important. "Someone wants you reactive," Vince said. "Not dead. Distracted." Salvatore nodded. He already knew. "What they didn't plan for," Eddie added carefully, "is leverage walking into your house." Silence. Salvatore's jaw tightened. "Say their names again." "No," Eddie said. "I won't." "Good," Salvatore replied. "Because they're mine." The California screen flickered. "That's sentimental talk." "No," Salvatore said softly. "That's ownership." The call ended shortly after. Salvatore didn't move. From the hallway he heard laughter. Children's laughter. Marco beating the dealer. Elena stacking chips wrong on purpose. Lucia stood in the doorway. You can't protect them with threats, she said quietly. I can protect them with certainty, he replied. And I just became certain of something. She crossed her arms. Which is? Someone used you to get to me, Salvatore said. That means you're no longer collateral. Lucia's eyes narrowed. What does that make us? Salvatore looked past her, toward the sound of his blood laughing in his house. It makes you the line, he said. And nobody crosses it twice. Lucia hesitated. And Isabella? Salvatore didn't answer right away. She already knows, he said finally. Which means she's deciding whether this ends with lawyers or funerals. Lucia swallowed. You're enjoying this? No, Salvatore said. I'm afraid of it. That was worse. From upstairs, Elena's voice floated down. Mom, he cheats. Salvatore smiled despite himself. Welcome home, he said. And somewhere, not far away, a man who thought he was invisible checked his phone and realized the silence meant he'd been noticed. Isabella De Luca didn't cry. She never had. She sat in her father's old study. Dark wood, leather chairs that smelled faintly of cigars and lemon oil, staring at her phone like it might confess something if she waited long enough. Outside, Manhattan moved the way it always did, indifferent to private earthquakes. Salvatore hadn't called. That was the first message. The second message came from her uncle, who didn't speak unless there was blood or money involved. You embarrassed him tonight. Be careful what you think you own. Isabella set the phone face down. She'd grown up watching men like Salvatore rise and fall. She knew the rules better than he thought she did. Loyalty lasted only as long as usefulness. Love was a luxury you paid for twice, once with your heart, once with your reputation. And tonight, Salvatore had brought his past into his future without asking permission. She poured herself a drink she didn't finish and stood, heels clicking sharply against the floor as she paced. In her head, the scene replayed, the woman in the rain, the children, the absence of denial. 2 children meant leverage, and leverage always attracted predators. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't family. Unknown number. Your fiancé is bleeding money. Thought you should know before someone else tells you first. Isabella stared at the message. Then another followed. Connecticut routes. California accounts. A woman with history. Isabella's lips curved into something that wasn't a smile. She typed back only 2 words. Who benefits? The reply came slower this time. Everyone who survives him. Salvatore woke before dawn. He hadn't slept much. The house sounded wrong at night. Doors opening softly. A toilet flushing. A child's nightmare murmured through walls not built for that kind of vulnerability. He dressed quietly, choosing a suit he hadn't worn in years. Charcoal. Conservative. The kind men wore when they planned to disappear someone without being seen. In the kitchen, Lucia was already awake. She stood barefoot at the counter, hair loose, holding a mug that steamed gently. She looked less armored like this, more dangerous. You always wake up early? She asked without turning. Only when I don't trust the day, Salvatore said. She nodded. Same. They stood in silence. 2 people who knew too much about each other and not enough about what came next. I got a message last night, Lucia said. Salvatore didn't ask from whom. He said if I stayed, it meant I chose sides. She continued. Said children inherit consequences whether they understand them or not. Salvatore felt heat rise behind his eyes. Did you answer? He asked. No, Lucia said. I came here so I wouldn't have to. He turned to face her. You're not bait. Lucia laughed softly. That's never been true. Before he could respond, Marco's voice drifted in from the hallway. Mom! Lucia's shoulders relaxed instantly. She turned toward the sound, armor snapping back into place. Yeah. Baby? I can't find my shoes. Salvatore watched it. The way she softened without losing awareness. The way Marco hovered at the edge of the doorway, already scanning Salvatore's face for threat or permission. There by the stairs, Salvatore said. Left side. Marco nodded once. Thanks. When he left, Lucia turned back. "They're learning," she said quietly, "whether you want them to or not." Salvatore's voice dropped. "So did I." The first move wasn't loud. It never was. A low-level runner from Jersey vanished off a payroll system that morning. Not dead. Worse. Cut off. Frozen accounts. No calls returned. By noon, a Connecticut bookmaker called asking for reassurance he didn't deserve. By 3, the California intermediary stopped answering altogether. Someone was pulling back. Testing. Salvatore stood in his office, phone pressed to his ear, eyes on the security feed showing his children. His children, playing cards on the living room floor. "They think I'll fold," he said into the phone. Vince Calderon's voice crackled back. "They think you'll choose." Salvatore smiled thinly. "I already did," he said. "They just don't know it yet." He ended the call and leaned back, exhaling slowly. Power, he knew, attracted two things: loyalty and vultures. Upstairs, Elena laughed as she took Marco's chips. In Manhattan, Isabella DeLuca sent one final message to a number she trusted too much. "I'm ready." And somewhere between Connecticut and California, a man who thought he'd built a perfect trap realized too late that the wrong thing had walked into the cage. The children weren't the weakness. They were the escalation. The first thing they took wasn't money. Salvatore noticed the absence before he understood the message. The offshore account tied to the Pennsylvania shell, quiet, clean, untouched for years, was still there. The Jersey books were still humming. No arrests, no freezes, no sudden interest from men with badges pretending to be accountants. Instead, his phone stopped ringing. Not completely, just selectively. 2 calls he expected before noon never came. A third went straight to voicemail and stayed there. The kind of silence that wasn't accidental, it was coordinated. He stood in his office, jacket off, sleeves rolled, watching the city through the tinted glass. Somewhere below, New York kept moving, unaware that a balance had shifted a fraction of an inch. "They're isolating you," Vince Calderon said through the speaker. Softly, Salvatore exhaled. "Who blinks first?" "No one yet," Vince replied. "That's the problem." Salvatore ended the call and turned to the security monitors. Marco was alone in the backyard, bouncing a ball against the brick wall, counting under his breath, testing angles. Elena sat on the steps nearby, lining up pebbles in uneven rows, humming to herself. Lucia stood at the kitchen window, pretending not to watch them. Salvatore walked in. "You need to keep them inside," he said. Lucia didn't turn. "You need to stop pretending walls matter." He paused. She was right, and they both knew it. "You trust anyone right now?" she asked. Salvatore considered the question carefully. "No," he said. "Then stop leaving the house," she replied. He almost smiled. The message came that night. Not to Salvatore. To Lucia. A single photo. Marco at school. Not from that day, older. Grainy. Pulled from a public source. Under it, a line of text. "You already know how this ends." Lucia's hands shook once. Then she deleted it. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't tell the children. She went upstairs and locked the door. Salvatore noticed anyway. He always noticed when rooms changed temperature. "What happened?" he asked quietly. Lucia handed him the phone. He stared at the image longer than he should have. "They crossed it," he said. Lucia's voice was steady. "They think they haven't." Salvatore handed the phone back. "Pack nothing. I'm moving you." "Where?" she asked. "Somewhere that doesn't exist on paper," he replied. "Downstairs." Marco's laughter echoed up the stairwell. Salvatore closed his eyes. The first thing they took wasn't money. It was the illusion that this could stay clean. And somewhere across state lines, a man who'd bet everything on Salvatore choosing restraint waited for an answer that wouldn't come. They left before dawn. No suitcases. No goodbye calls. No digital trail. Salvatore wore jeans and a windbreaker that cost more than most people's cars. Lucia dressed the kids in layers, practical and unremarkable. Marco asked no questions. Elena asked too many and got half answers that felt like promises. The car wasn't Salvatore's. That mattered. They drove north, then west, then north again, routes that contradicted themselves. The city thinned into industrial stretches, then woods, then long, empty roads where even cell towers seemed to hesitate. "Are we on vacation?" Elena asked. Lucia smiled without humor. "Something like that." Salvatore watched the rearview mirror more than the road. After 4 hours, they turned onto a road that didn't show up on any map Salvatore trusted. Gravel, narrow, flanked by trees that leaned inward like they were listening. The house appeared suddenly. Low, old, forgettable, a place designed to be overlooked. "This is Connecticut?" Lucia asked. "Technically," Salvatore said. "Emotionally, no." The man waiting on the porch didn't smile when they pulled up. Frank Iacono had been old when Salvatore was young. Now he looked like a fossil that refused to crumble. Thick hands, cloudy eyes, posture still stubbornly straight. Frank looked at the children first. That mattered too. "Inside," Frank said. "You're late." "We're alive," Salvatore replied. "That counts." Frank grunted and stepped aside. Inside, the house smelled like coffee and would smoke. No cameras. No smart devices. A landline that probably hadn't changed numbers since Reagan. "This place doesn't exist," Frank said. "No utilities in my name. No mail. No records newer than 20 years. Lucia nodded slowly. "And the cost?" Frank looked at Salvatore. "Everything eventually." The news reached them anyway. It always did. Eddie Klein was out. Not arrested. Replaced. A quiet vote. Jersey tightening its belt. A message wrapped in procedure. "They're shrinking the circle," Vince Calderone said over the landline. "Making you radioactive." Salvatore leaned against the counter, jaw tight. "Then why hasn't anyone made a move?" "Because no one wants to be first," Vince replied. "You still scare them." Salvatore looked through the doorway at Marco, who was playing cards with Frank like it was a lesson instead of a game. "How long?" Salvatore asked. Vince hesitated. "Until they decide fear costs more than you do." The line went dead. That night, Lucia found Salvatore outside, sitting on the porch steps, staring into the dark. "You didn't tell me you were losing ground," she said. He didn't look at her. "I didn't know how much." "You still don't," she replied. She sat beside him. "For 9 years," she said quietly. "I taught myself not to think about you. Not because I hated you, because it was safer." Salvatore swallowed. And now you're everywhere," she said. "In their faces, in their names, in the people watching us." He finally looked at her. "I didn't know." Lucia met his eyes. "That's what scares me." From inside, Elena laughed. Salvatore closed his eyes. For the first time, he understood the real cost of power. It didn't buy safety. It bought time. And time was running out. The call came at 3:17 a.m. The landline rang once, then stopped. Frank Iacono was already awake. Salvatore felt it before he heard it. The shift in the house, the way stillness leaned forward instead of resting. He was on his feet before the second ring finished echoing through the hallway. Frank lifted the receiver slowly, eyes on Salvatore the entire time. He listened, didn't speak. When he hung up, the silence afterward was heavier than the ring had been. "They know," Frank said. Lucia appeared in the doorway, hair loose, face pale but composed. "Know what?" Frank didn't soften his voice. "Where you're not supposed to be." Salvatore's chest tightened. "How?" Frank shrugged. "Doesn't matter. Someone close enough to guess. Someone patient enough to wait." Marco stood at the top of the stairs, unseen until Elena tugged his sleeve. "What's happening?" Marco asked. Lucia moved instantly. "Nothing for you to worry about." Marco didn't believe her. He nodded anyway. That scared Salvatore more than panic would have. The mistake wasn't obvious. That was the problem. No unfamiliar cars. No broken systems. No voices on the line claiming credit. Just confirmation that the bubble had thinned. Salvatore paced the kitchen, replaying decisions like hands of cards he wished he'd folded earlier. They didn't come for us, Lucia said quietly. They came to let us know they could. Frank poured coffee. That's how it starts. Salvatore stopped pacing. No, that's how it ends. Frank looked at him. You planning to burn something? Salvatore didn't answer, because he already had. Isabella De Luca stood at a window overlooking the East River, phone pressed to her ear, listening to a man explain a situation she already understood better than he did. They've moved him, the voice said. Connecticut. Old property. Someone old enough to be forgotten. And the children? Isabella asked. Still with him. Isabella closed her eyes. That made it complicated. Who told you? She asked. A pause. That's not optional, she finished. Not anymore. Another pause. Longer this time. Eddie, the voice said, before he disappeared. Isabella hung up. She didn't throw the phone. She didn't shout. She adjusted her coat, smoothed her hair, and walked out of the room like a woman who just made peace with a decision she'd been rehearsing for years. Betrayal, she knew, didn't always look like a knife. Sometimes it looked like timing. Back in Connecticut, Salvatore knelt beside Marco on the living room floor. They were playing cards again. Same game, different stakes. You ever notice, Salvatore said casually, how some people don't cheat until they're losing? Marco studied his hand. My mom says people show you who they are when they think no one's watching. Salvatore smiled thinly. Your mom's right. Marco looked up. Are you going to hurt someone? The question was direct. No fear. Just curiosity edged with something harder. Salvatore didn't lie. Yes, he said. Marco nodded once. Okay. That answer landed wrong. Salvatore leaned closer. That's not okay. Marco shrugged. You said people don't cheat until they're losing. So that means they already did something bad. Salvatore sat back, the weight of the moment settling into his bones. You're not supposed to understand that yet, he said. Marco met his eyes. But I do. From the doorway, Lucia watched the exchange with something close to dread. Not because of Salvatore, because of what she saw taking shape in her son. That night, the second message came. Not a photo, a location, pinned, accurate, recent. Under it, one line, next time we don't miss. Salvatore crushed the phone in his hand. Frank reached for his jacket. We move. Now. Salvatore shook his head. No, he said. We stop moving. Lucia turned sharply. What does that mean? It means, Salvatore said, voice low and certain. Someone close to me thought they could control the board by forcing me into corners. He looked at Lucia, then toward the dark window. And I'm done proving them right. Outside, a car passed on the road it wasn't supposed to know about. And for the first time since this started, Salvatore Rizzo understood exactly who was going to make the next move. The only question was whether they'd realize too late that they'd already made it. Salvatore didn't sleep. He sat at the small kitchen table with Frank Iacono, the landline between them like a relic from a war that never officially happened. The coffee went cold. The sky outside shifted from black to gray without either man acknowledging it. Standing still, Salvatore knew, was louder than running. Once you stop moving, Frank said, voice rough with age, you invite decisions. Salvatore nodded. That's the point. At 6:42 a.m., the phone rang. Frank answered, listened, handed the receiver to Salvatore without a word. Vince Calderon's voice came through thin and urgent. You just cost me 3 accounts. Then it's working, Salvatore replied. People think you're unstable, Vince said. They think you're emotional. Salvatore's mouth twitched. Good. Isabella's moving, Vince continued. Quiet. Legal. She's freezing assets without touching them, making it look like compliance. Salvatore closed his eyes. She's building a case without filing one. Yes, Vince said. And if she finishes, nobody steps in front of it. Salvatore hung up. Lucia stood in the doorway listening. You're letting them believe you're cornered. I am cornered, Salvatore said. I'm just choosing which wall breaks first. By mid-morning, the house had visitors. Not soldiers. Auditors. Men in windbreakers who spoke softly and asked for nothing. They stood at the end of the driveway, hands visible, faces forgettable. Federal, Lucia whispered. No, Salvatore replied. Worse. Frank watched them through the window. Compliance scouts. Someone tipped them off just enough. Salvatore stepped outside alone. The men didn't threaten. They didn't accuse. They smiled too easily. We're just following procedure, one said. Making sure everything's above board. Salvatore smiled back. I hope you like paperwork, he said. Because this place doesn't exist. They left an hour later with nothing but irritation and questions they couldn't write down. But the message was clear. Isabella wasn't aiming to arrest him. She was aiming to erase him. Inside, Lucia packed a small bag. You said we weren't moving, she said. We aren't, Salvatore replied. You are. She froze. No, just for now, he said. Frank will take you north. Somewhere colder. Harder to reach. Lucia's voice shook once. I didn't come back to lose you again. Salvatore stepped closer. You came back because you were already losing. They stared at each other, the truth heavy and unkind. From the hallway, Marco watched silently. I'm not leaving, Marco said. Lucia turned. Marco. No, he said. If he's staying, I'm staying. Salvatore knelt in front of him. This isn't a game. Marco met his eyes. Then stop playing it without us. Elena wrapped her arms around Lucia's leg. The house felt smaller again. Salvatore stood. Fine, he said. Then we all stay. Frank cursed under his breath. That's not smart. Salvatore looked at him. Neither is letting them think I'll sacrifice blood to save reputation. That night, the final signal arrived. Not digital. Physical. A dead phone placed neatly on the porch steps. No message. No fingerprints. No explanation. Just a reminder. Lucia stared at it. What does that mean? Salvatore picked it up carefully. It means, he said, Isabella's done waiting. He looked out into the darkness, jaw set. She's not trying to win, he said. She's trying to be the only one left standing. Inside, Marco shuffled the cards with deliberate focus. Outside, engines hummed faintly in the distance. Too far to see, too close to ignore. Standing still had done exactly what Salvatore wanted. It had forced everyone to reveal how far they were willing to go. And tomorrow, someone was going to pay the price for that honesty. Chapter 9. When the walls move, the engines didn't leave. They circled. Salvatore counted them by sound alone. 2 SUVs, maybe 3, idling in rotation just outside the perimeter of visibility. Professional. Patient. The kind of men who believed time did the work for them. Inside, the house breathed shallowly. Lucia sat on the couch with Elena asleep against her chest. One hand covering the child's ear every time a car door closed somewhere in the dark. Marco stood at the window, pretending not to watch, pretending not to memorize every shadow. Frank checked his watch for the 5th time in 10 minutes. They're not here to hit you, he said quietly. They're here to make you move. Salvatore adjusted the bandage beneath his shirt. Still tender, still angry. Isabella doesn't bluff. No, Frank agreed. She documents. The front gate camera flickered, then steadied. Salvatore's phone buzzed. One message. Unknown number. You can still walk away. Lucia looked up. Is that her? Salvatore didn't answer. He typed back instead. Not without my children. The response came instantly. They were never yours. Something in Salvatore cracked, not loudly, not visibly. Just enough to change the temperature in the room. He stood. Frank. Get the contingency moving. Frank's eyes narrowed. You sure? No, Salvatore said. But I'm done standing still. Across town, Isabella Moretti watched the same feeds from a glass-walled office that smelled like lemon polish and money. Her hair was pulled back tight, her expression immaculate. They haven't fled, her assistant said. That's not rational. Isabella didn't look away from the screen. Neither is guilt. Federal interest is spiking, the assistant continued. If this tips, It won't, Isabella said calmly. He'll make a mistake before dawn. She picked up her phone and dialed. Send him the offer, she said. The knock came at 2:11 a.m. Not a pound. Polite, measured knock. Salvatore opened the door himself. The man on the porch wore a charcoal coat and carried a slim folder. No weapon visible. No fear in his eyes. Mr. Moretti, the man said. Ms. Isabella believes this can end quietly. Salvatore took the folder. Inside documents, custody filings, asset freezes, a pathway so clean it was surgical. Lucia read over his shoulder and gasped. She's trying to take them. No, Salvatore said softly. She's trying to make me disappear. The man cleared his throat. If you sign, she guarantees protection for the children. New names. New life. Marco stepped forward. Without him, the man hesitated just long enough to be noticed. Salvatore closed the folder. You tell her this, he said evenly. I built my world by cutting deals that spared others the mess. He leaned closer. I won't cut one that teaches my son how to run. The man swallowed. Then this gets ugly. Salvatore smiled, slow and cold. It already is. Minutes after the door closed, Frank's phone rang. They're moving assets, Frank said. Fast. She's burning bridges. Good, Salvatore replied. So am I. He turned to Lucia. You trust me? She searched his face. The scars, the exhaustion. The man who had once vanished and now refused to disappear again. Yes, she said. But don't ask me to forgive you if this fails. I won't, Salvatore said. I'll ask you to survive. Outside, one of the engines cut. Then another. A different sound replaced them. Footsteps. Salvatore reached for his jacket. Marco grabbed his hand. Don't go. Salvatore squeezed back. This ends tonight. As he stepped into the dark, the house behind him full of everything he could lose, one truth settled heavier than fear. Isabella wasn't attacking his empire anymore. She was testing whether love could make him reckless. And for the first time in his life, Salvatore Moretti intended to prove that it could. The gunshot didn't echo. It folded into the night, swallowed by trees and distance, as if the world itself refused to acknowledge what had just happened. Salvatore hit the ground hard, breath ripping out of him in a sound that didn't feel human. The pain came a second later, white, blinding, precise. A hot line tearing through his side, blooming outward with every heartbeat. He pressed his palm against the wound. Blood soaked through his fingers immediately. Not fatal. He knew that because he could still think. And because he could still hear Marco screaming his name. Dad! Frank tackled Marco backward as another shot cracked. This one closer. Wood splintered off the fence. Elena started crying inside the house, high and panicked. A sound that shredded something deep in Salvatore's chest. He forced himself up. Bad move. The world tilted. But he stayed on his feet. One arm braced against the SUV. The other gripping the gun Frank had shoved into his hand earlier, just in case. Across the clearing, a shape moved. Isabella's man. Not the messenger. This one was different. Younger. Hungrier. The kind who wanted credit. You should have signed, the man called out, voice tight with adrenaline. This didn't have to be personal. Salvatore laughed. A wet, broken sound. You brought it to my kids. The man hesitated. That was the mistake. Salvatore fired. Short, controlled, final. The body dropped without ceremony. The night closing around it like a secret. Sirens wailed in the far distance, not for them. Not yet. Frank was at Salvatore's side instantly. Ambulance is 10 out. Maybe less. Salvatore shook his head. No hospitals. Sal. No hospitals. He repeated, teeth clenched. Not tonight. Lucia burst out the front door with Elena in her arms, her face draining when she saw the blood. She crossed the distance in seconds, knees hitting the ground beside him, hands shaking as she pressed against the wound. Stay with me, she whispered. You don't get to leave again. Salvatore looked at her, really looked at her, the woman who had survived him, The children who had waited without knowing what they were waiting for. The life he almost chose power over. "I'm here," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." Dawn came slow, gray, quiet, exhausted. Salvatore lay on the couch, stitched and pale, the house smelling faintly of antiseptic and coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Frank sat at the table, phone in pieces, dismantling it like a ritual. "It's done," Frank said. "Isabella's frozen herself trying to freeze you. Feds are circling her now." Salvatore nodded. "She won." Frank looked up sharply. "You're alive. Your family's alive." "That's not winning her game," Salvatore replied. "That's ending mine." Lucia entered with Marco and Elena, both wrapped in blankets, both watching him with eyes too old for their faces. Marco climbed up carefully, curling against Salvatore's uninjured side. "You didn't run," Marco said. Salvatore swallowed. "No." "Good," Marco whispered, and fell asleep. Lucia sat on the floor beside them, her hand resting over Salvatore's heart, feeling it beat. Slow, stubborn, real. "I'm done," Salvatore said quietly. "No more half measures. No more pretending I can protect you from a distance." Lucia didn't answer right away. Then, "That's the first smart thing you've said in years." 6 months later, Salvatore stood in the same city, but a different building. Smaller. No tinted glass. No armed lobby. He wore a simple jacket. No cufflinks. No watch worth more than a car. Marco rode a bike in the courtyard below, wobbling and laughing. Elena toddled after him, arms outstretched, fearless. Lucia watched them from the steps, sunlight in her hair. Salvatore joined her. "Do you miss it?" she asked. He thought about the power, the fear, the control. Then he looked at his hands, scarred, steady, empty of blood. "No," he said. "I miss thinking it meant something." Lucia leaned into him. This time he didn't step away. Power, Salvatore learned too late, wasn't who answered your calls. It was who stayed when everything else burned. And if this story made you feel something, if you're still here, still listening, then you already know why this didn't end cleanly. Because some choices don't come with forgiveness. They come with consequences. Backhand index pointing down. Now tell me in the comments, would you have walked away from power? Or would you have signed the deal? Bell subscribe and turn on notifications if you want part 2. Because this world doesn't stop just because one man chose family. And trust me, there are still people watching.